I didn't find out because I was snooping. That's the part that still messes with my head. I wasn't digging through her phone, wasn't tracking her location, wasn't looking for cracks. I was sitting in my car outside our place, engine off, radio dead, staring at the dark window like it might blink first. Emily had texted 10 minutes earlier, running late. Don't wait up. Nothing unusual. Except it was Tuesday. Except she'd said the same thing last Friday. And the one before that. Our town isn't the kind of place where things stay hidden for long. It's small enough that the barista knows your order and the cashier asks about your mom. It's also small enough that when something feels off, the silence around it gets loud. That night, the silence was screaming. I finally went inside around midnight. The apartment smelled clean in a way that felt staged. Candle burned down too evenly, counters wiped too carefully. Emily wasn't there. Her jacket was gone. Her keys weren't on the hook. I told myself 100 reasonable stories. Late shift. Girls' night. Dead phone. I went to bed believing at least one of them had to be true. I woke up at 3:17 a.m. to the sound of the door opening. She moved quietly, like someone breaking into their own life. I didn't pretend to sleep. I just lay there, staring at the ceiling, listening to her breathe as she slipped under the covers. She smelled different. Not bad. Just not like us. Hey, she whispered. Hey, I said. That was it. No kiss. No joke. No apology. The gap between us felt wider than the room. The next few weeks passed in fragments. Half conversations. Phones turned face down. Laughing at messages she wouldn't share. I started noticing patterns. The way she dressed nicer for errands. The sudden interest in staying out late. The way my questions made her defensive instead of reassuring. I didn't confront her. Not yet. Some part of me needed certainty, not just suspicion. Another part was terrified of being right. The truth came to me in the least dramatic way possible. I was at the grocery store after work, standing in line, when I heard her laugh. That same laugh she used to save for me. She was 3 aisles over, leaning into a guy I didn't recognize. His hand rested on her lower back like it belonged there. They weren't hiding. They didn't need to. She saw me first. Her face didn't go pale. It didn't panic. It hardened. Like she'd already rehearsed this moment and was annoyed it was finally happening. We talked that night. Or what passes for talking when one person is already gone. She admitted enough without saying everything. Said it just happened. Said she hadn't meant to hurt me. Said she needed something different. I asked her if she loved him. She didn't answer. That was my answer. She moved out 2 days later. Took the couch pillow she liked and the coffee mugs her sister bought us. Left behind a space that felt bigger than the apartment itself. I told myself the story ended there. Betrayal. Breakup. Lesson learned. I didn't know yet that this was only the prologue. People think the worst part of being cheated on is the moment you find out. It's not. The worst part is everything that comes after, when there's no adrenaline left. Just empty time and questions that don't have answers. Emily moved out fast, like she'd been packing emotionally for weeks. The apartment changed overnight. Her side of the closet became dead space. The bathroom felt sterile, like a hotel room after checkout. I caught myself listening for her keys out of habit, then remembering there was no one coming home. In a small town, breakups don't stay private. By the end of the week, people were already choosing sides without asking what happened. Some avoided eye contact. Others offered sympathy that felt rehearsed. You doing okay, man? Yeah. I lied every time. At night, my mind replayed everything backward, searching for the moment I missed. Every laugh. Every late night. Every time I trusted her when something felt off. I wasn't just angry at Emily. I was angry at myself for believing so easily. I stopped going out. The bars reminded me of her. The grocery store still felt unsafe. Even driving past certain streets made my chest tighten. I stuck to work, home, and the gym, like routine could replace purpose. That's where I first noticed her. She was there most evenings, always around the same time as me. Not trying to be seen. Not trying not to be seen either. Mid-30s, maybe. Calm posture. Focused. No headphones, just her thoughts and the steady rhythm of movement. One night, she asked if I was using the bench. Her voice was confident without being loud. Yeah, no, sorry. All yours, I said, standing too fast. She smiled. Thanks. I'm Rachel. Noah. That was it. No flirting. No curiosity. Just names exchanged like neighbors passing on a sidewalk. But after that, I started noticing her more. The way she stretched with intention. The way she didn't check her phone between sets. The way she seemed completely present in her own body, something I realized I hadn't been in months. We didn't talk again for a week. The second conversation happened in the parking lot. My car wouldn't start. Dead battery. Small town problems. You need a jump? She asked, already holding cables. I hesitated, then nodded. As we waited for my engine to turn over, she asked the kind of questions people only ask when they're actually listening. Where I worked. How long I'd lived here. If I liked it. It's fine, I said. She laughed softly. That's the most honest answer I've heard all day. After that, we talked more. Still nothing dramatic. Just bits and pieces. She never asked about Emily. I never volunteered. There was something relieving about being seen as just a person, not a story. The first time Emily came up, it was accidental. Rachel mentioned she'd seen her at a fundraiser with someone new. I stiffened before I could stop myself. Sorry, Rachel said. I didn't mean. It's fine, I lied again. Then paused. Actually, it's not. But it will be. She studied me for a moment, then nodded. Yeah, it will. There was no pity in her voice. No advice. Just certainty. I didn't know it yet, but that certainty was going to change everything. Rachel and I didn't start hanging out the way people usually do. There was no "want to grab a drink sometime" moment. No clear line where acquaintances turned into something else. It happened in the spaces between routine. We'd talk after workouts, leaning against our cars, the sky already dark. Sometimes it was 5 minutes. Sometimes 20. The conversations weren't deep at first. Work, town gossip, whether that never seemed to decide what season it wanted to be. But there was an ease to it that felt dangerous in the best way. One night, she asked me why I always trained so hard on leg day. I shrugged. Keeps my head quiet. She nodded like that made perfect sense. Yeah, I get that. That was when I realized she wasn't filling silence. She was sharing it. Eventually, the subject of age came up. I guessed wrong at first. She corrected me with a small smile. 35, she said. If that's not a deal breaker. I laughed, surprised at myself. Why would it be? She held my gaze a second longer than necessary. Just checking. After that, things shifted. Not dramatically. Just enough that I started noticing the way she looked at me when I talked about something I cared about. The way she didn't rush to respond, like she was weighing words instead of reacting. One evening, we ended up at the same diner after the gym. Small town coincidence. Or maybe neither of us tried very hard to avoid it. Sit, she said, gesturing to her booth. We talked for an hour. Then 2. I told her about Emily. Not the betrayal in detail, but the way it made me question my own judgment. She listened without interrupting, without jumping to conclusions. You know, she said finally, being betrayed doesn't mean you were foolish. It means you were open. That sentence landed harder than anything anyone else had said since the breakup. Our first moment of real tension came when she brushed her hand against mine, reaching for the check. It was accidental. We both froze. No rush to pull away. No apology. Something old in me stirred. Something careful and new replaced it. We didn't kiss that night. Or the next. The restraint felt intentional, like we were both aware that whatever this was, it wasn't casual. Meanwhile, Emily's presence in town grew louder. She and the guy from the store, his name was Mark, I learned without asking, started showing up together. Bars. Events. Places she and I used to go. It felt deliberate. I mentioned it to Rachel once, more as an observation than a complaint. She wants you to see, Rachel said calmly. Why? Rachel smiled, not unkindly. Because being seen matters to her. Even now. That was the first time revenge crossed my mind. Not in any clear plan. Just a flicker of curiosity. A question I didn't voice. Rachel must have sensed it. Careful, she said lightly. That road can be tempting. I looked at her. And you? Have you been tempted before? Her expression changed. Not sad. Just distant. Everyone has. The air between us felt heavier after that. Charged. Like we were standing near something powerful and pretending not to notice. I drove home that night aware of 2 truths at once. I wasn't over Emily, and I was no longer alone with that fact. Something was forming. Slowly. Deliberately. And I had a feeling it wasn't going to stay harmless. The first time Rachel came over, it wasn't planned. That's how most important things seem to happen. Slipping past your defenses because you didn't label them as dangerous. My apartment was still half empty, emotionally if not physically. Emily's absence lingered in ways I hadn't bothered fixing. One chair missing from the table. A picture frame turned face down on the bookshelf. Rachel noticed everything without commenting. Want some coffee? I asked. At 9 at night? She said, amused. Sure. I like bad decisions. We sat on opposite ends of the couch at first, cups in our hands, knees angled toward each other without acknowledging it. The conversation drifted, work stress, people we used to be, the strange comfort of small towns where everyone knows your past whether you like it or not. Why did you stay here? I asked her suddenly. She considered the question. Because leaving doesn't always mean escaping. Sometimes it just delays the work. That was Rachel in a sentence. At some point, the topic circled back to Emily. I hadn't planned to bring her up, but something about the quiet made it feel inevitable. She's happier, I said. At least she looks like it. Rachel didn't correct me. Appearances are efficient tools. I laughed softly. You talk like you've done this before. Been betrayed? She asked. Or watched someone pretend they won? Both. She set her cup down carefully. Yes. That was the night she told me about her ex-husband. Not in detail. Just enough to explain the way she measured people before trusting them. How betrayal doesn't always come with drama. Sometimes it arrives dressed as comfort. When she stood to leave, the air shifted. We were close enough now that I could smell her perfume. Subtle, intentional. She paused by the door, hand on the knob. This is where I should go, she said. I nodded. Yeah. Neither of us moved. She turned back, just slightly. Noah, whatever this is, don't use it to hurt yourself. Or her. I'm not, I said quickly. She studied me. Good. Because intention matters. Then she left. Emily texted me that night for the first time in weeks. Hey, I heard you've been hanging out with someone new. I stared at the message longer than I should have. My first instinct was to ignore it. My second was anger. My third, if I'm being honest, was satisfaction. People talk, I typed back, then deleted it. I didn't respond. The next time I saw Emily was at a charity event downtown. Small town, small circles. She was with Mark, her hand hooked through his arm like an accessory. When she saw me, her smile sharpened. Rachel was there too. Not with me. Just present. Emily noticed her immediately. I could tell by the way her eyes lingered, measuring. Rachel met her gaze calmly, then turned away, uninterested. Later that night, Rachel found me by the bar. She's watching, she said quietly. I know. Rachel took a sip of her drink. Good. Good. She smiled, just a little. If someone's watching, it means they care how the story looks. That was the moment I understood something important. Rachel wasn't reacting to Emily. She was thinking 3 steps ahead. And for the first time since the breakup, I felt something that wasn't grief or anger. I felt control. Control is a strange thing. You don't notice its absence until it returns, quiet and steady, like your breath finally evening out after panic. After that night at the fundraiser, something in me shifted. I stopped bracing myself for Emily's presence. I stopped rehearsing what I'd say if we ever talked again. Rachel noticed before I did. You're lighter, she said one evening as we walked out of the gym. Not happier, just steadier. I don't feel lighter, I said. She smiled. That's because it's real. We started spending more time together after that. Still nothing we could point to and name, but enough that people noticed. Coffee turned into long walks. Walks turned into dinners that stretched past closing time. There was an unspoken agreement not to rush, as if both of us understood that moving too fast would cheapen whatever this was becoming. The town, however, had no such patience. I started hearing things secondhand. Emily asking questions. Emily making comments. Emily suddenly interested in places she'd never cared about before. The same bar on Thursdays. The same cafe on Sunday mornings. She's orbiting, Rachel said when I told her. That sounds intentional. It is. The word revenge hovered at the edge of my thoughts more often now. Not violent. Not cruel. Just corrective. I didn't want to hurt Emily. I wanted her to feel what she'd dismissed so easily, the sense of being replaceable. Rachel never encouraged it directly. That's the part people wouldn't understand. She didn't whisper plans or fuel my anger. She simply asked questions that sharpened my thinking. What do you want her to believe? What outcome actually satisfies you? And what would leave you emptier than before? One night, sitting on my couch again, closer this time, Rachel finally crossed the line we'd been circling. She rested her head briefly on my shoulder. Not dramatic, not seductive, just intimate. My heart raced anyway. This, she said quietly, is as far as we go tonight. I didn't argue. That restraint made everything else feel deliberate. Emily eventually cornered me. Grocery store. Same place I'd first seen her with Mark. Full circle. So, she said, arms crossed. You and Rachel, huh? I raised an eyebrow. You know her name. She flushed. People talk. Yeah, I said evenly. They do. You moved on fast, she added, her tone sharp. I almost laughed. Almost. Instead, I said, you moved on first. Her mouth opened, then closed. No comeback. Just frustration. That night, I told Rachel about the encounter. And how did that feel? She asked. I thought about it. Cleaner than I expected. She nodded. Good. That means you're not lying to yourself. The plan, if you could call it that, came together without a formal agreement. No checklist. No moment of conspiracy. Just alignment. Rachel started showing up where Emily would see her. Not overtly. Just present enough to be noticed. Confident. Untouchable. Everything Emily tried to project, but never quite embodied. I stayed quiet. That was my role. Silence, I learned, is unnerving when someone expects a reaction. The final piece clicked into place when Mark started asking around about Rachel. Jealousy travels fast in small towns. Rachel told me this with a calm smile. See? The story's writing itself. For now, I said. She looked at me then, really looked. Careful, Noah. Make sure you like who you are at the end of this. I thought I did. I wasn't so sure anymore. Because the more Emily unraveled, the more I realized this wasn't just about her. It was about who I was becoming, and whether I could stop once I'd started. There's a difference between revenge and observation. I told myself we were doing the latter, that we weren't pushing anything, just letting Emily trip over her own expectations. Still, I couldn't ignore the quiet satisfaction that came with each new rumor, each awkward interaction I heard about secondhand. Mark started showing up at the gym. That alone told me everything. He never spoke to me directly, just watched, compared, measured. I recognized the look because I'd worn it myself once, when I thought I was being replaced. Rachel noticed him too. He's insecure, she said. Adjusting the weight on a machine like this was casual conversation. That's going to complicate things. For who? I asked. For everyone. Emily, meanwhile, became harder to miss. She laughed louder, dressed sharper, made sure she was seen. The effort showed, and effort has a way of revealing desperation when it's not grounded in confidence. The strangest part was how little I felt when I saw her now. No surge of anger, no longing, just distance, like watching someone you used to know through thick glass. Rachel and I finally crossed another line one night after dinner. No announcement, no hesitation, just a shared look that asked a question neither of us needed to answer out loud. The kiss was slow, intentional, not hungry but deep, like we were confirming something we already knew. Afterward, we sat in silence, foreheads touching. This doesn't change the plan, I said. There is no plan, she replied. Just consequences. I slept better that night than I had in months. The next morning, Emily called me. Not texted. Called. I let it ring twice before answering. What do you want? I asked, not unkindly. There was a pause. I heard things. Small town, I said. She exhaled sharply. Are you happy? The question caught me off guard. Not because I didn't know the answer, but because she was asking it now. I'm honest, I said finally. For the first time in a while. She didn't like that. I could hear it. That afternoon, Rachel told me Mark had asked someone if she was serious about me. Not curious. Not casual. Serious. That's fear talking, she said. Fear wants certainty. And if he doesn't get it? She shrugged. People make mistakes. Emily's mistake came sooner than I expected. She showed up at Rachel's work. Not to confront. To observe. To compare. A move so transparent, it almost hurt to watch. Rachel told me afterward, her expression unreadable. She smiled the whole time, Rachel said. But her eyes were screaming. That night, I asked Rachel the question I'd been avoiding. Are we going too far? She considered it. Do you feel powerful, or do you feel aligned? I thought about it. The calm. The clarity. The absence of chaos. Aligned, I said. She nodded. Then you're still yourself. But alignment can slip. Quietly. One rationalization at a time. Because when Mark finally confronted Emily, when jealousy turned into accusation, I wasn't there. Rachel wasn't there. But we were the reason. And knowing that felt heavier than I expected. For the first time, I wondered if revenge, even the quiet kind, always demands a price. And whether I'd already agreed to pay it. Rachel, and I didn't need to speak in plans. Small-town life does half the work for you. A well-timed presence here, a quiet comment there, and suddenly people start drawing their own conclusions. We weren't cruel. We weren't conspiring with malice. We were just deliberate. I watched Emily start second-guessing herself. The confidence she flaunted was still there, but cracks appeared when she thought no one was looking. She lingered too long at bars, her smiles more calculated than real. Her posts on social media became sharper, defensive. I didn't intervene. I simply observed, letting the consequences of her choices unfold naturally. Rachel's influence was subtle. She had this way of showing up where Emily would see her, at charity events, the gym, even local coffee shops, without drawing attention. Just presence. And yet, the effect was undeniable. Emily couldn't help but notice. Her posture, the tilt of her head, the sudden nervous laughter, all signs she felt watched and compared. One evening, Rachel and I sat on the hood of my car, parked near the lake. The sun had dipped behind the trees, leaving streaks of gold and pink over the water. It was silent, except for the occasional rustle of leaves. You know, Rachel said softly, people often confuse presence with intrusion. They think if someone notices, it's an attack. I nodded, thinking about Emily. And it isn't? It depends on the intent, she said. You're not attacking. You're reminding her what she overlooked. I looked at her, realizing the truth in that. Her calm presence was like gravity. It pulled, without ever pushing. I was drawn to it, caught between admiration and something more, something I wasn't ready to name yet. That night, we left the lake without a word. Not because words weren't enough, but because silence carried weight we didn't want to dilute. I started to notice how often I measured my movements by her proximity, how often I considered her reactions before making a choice. It wasn't obsession. It was attunement. The next day, Emily showed up at the gym again. Mark was with her, tense and protective. I stayed quiet, lifting weights while she lingered in my peripheral vision. She caught my eye briefly. For the first time, I noticed the uncertainty there, the glimmer of doubt. Later, Rachel texted me. She's watching, but she's noticing. Good. Good. That word felt foreign. For weeks, revenge had been a concept, a flicker in my mind. But now it was real, controlled, almost elegant. We weren't malicious, just precise. And precision, I realized, required patience. The following week, Emily tried reaching out again. This time, a message, Noah, can we talk? I need closure. I stared at it, thumb hovering over the screen. Closure. What did that even mean in this context? She hadn't thought about closure before. Only her comfort. Only what she wanted. I didn't respond immediately. Rachel and I met later that night for coffee. I showed her the message. She read it. Took a slow sip. Do you feel closure coming from replying? Or from watching her stumble? Watching, I admitted. She smiled. Not approving, not cruel. Just acknowledging a truth I had known all along. And that night, for the first time in weeks, I slept without the weight of anger pressing down. Instead, there was clarity, and a quiet anticipation of what was still to come. Things escalated without either of us planning it. Small towns have a way of amplifying whispers into storms. Emily was starting to feel it, the invisible pressure, the sense that every step she took was being measured. And Rachel was the calm eye in the middle of it all. It was a Friday evening when it became undeniable. We were at the diner, same place we first had those long conversations. Rachel arrived before me, sipping a coffee, reading a book. I slid into the booth opposite her. She's here, she said casually, not looking up. I followed her gaze. Emily was seated at the counter, Mark beside her, laughing too loudly. But something was off. Her movements weren't confident. They were calculated. Nervous. She thinks she's still in control, Rachel said, closing her book. I leaned back. Does she know we're aware? She knows someone's paying attention, Rachel replied. That's enough. The night unfolded slowly. Emily tried to catch my eye. I ignored her. Rachel remained perfectly poised, chatting with the waitress, flipping her hair with effortless grace. Every glance Emily threw was filled with tension, almost panic, and it didn't go unnoticed by anyone else in the diner. That quiet awareness, that subtle dominance, was something Emily hadn't anticipated. Later, we walked out together. The town was quiet, streetlights reflecting on wet pavement from an earlier rain. I felt the shift between us, not in words, not in actions, but in energy. Something had changed. Something tangible. You feel that? I asked. Rachel smiled slightly. Yes. The pendulum swings slowly, but it always swings. What happens when it stops? I asked. She considered it. Then you decide whether you've learned enough, or whether you've just proven a point. Emily called me that night. Not a text. An actual call. Her voice trembled more than I expected. Noah. I need to explain. I listened. Half of what she said was excuses. Half was confession. And all of it was irrelevant. Because I wasn't listening for her reasons anymore. I was listening to the echoes of her own realization, of the instability she had created. Rachel was with me as I hung up. She didn't ask for details. She didn't probe. She just placed her hand on mine. Solid. Grounding. That's the moment, she said. When they realize, not when you act. I nodded, the truth settling into my chest. Revenge wasn't about confrontation. It was about letting the consequences of their choices land. Letting the universe, or the small-town social circle, do its work. And watching someone like Rachel operate within it was mesmerizing. We began spending more time together in subtle ways that Emily noticed. A conversation here, a shared laugh there. But we never crossed the line in public. Just hints. A glance. A touch on the arm. Enough to unsettle. Enough to remind Emily that she no longer held the center of my world. That weekend, she posted something on social media. A picture of her and Mark with the caption, New Beginnings. I didn't reply. I didn't like it. But I sent Rachel a single word via text. Noticed. Her reply was instant. Exactly. And for the first time, I understood the depth of what we were doing. It wasn't cruelty. It wasn't obsession. It was a lesson delivered quietly, elegantly, by patience and presence. And the best part? Emily didn't even realize who was orchestrating it. Only that the ground under her was shifting, and she couldn't control it. By now, Emily was visibly unraveling. Her confidence, once sharp and flashy, had dulled. I saw her in the cafe, her smile forced, her eyes darting. She lingered longer than she used to, scanning the room as if expecting to see someone, but not finding what she was looking for. Rachel and I had developed a rhythm that was almost imperceptible to anyone else. The subtle touches, the shared glances, the timing of our appearances. Small things, really. But in a small town, small things mean everything. Emily began to notice patterns. She hesitated in conversations, paused where she once would have laughed freely, and began second-guessing herself without realizing why. One afternoon, we were walking through the park. Autumn leaves crunching beneath our feet. The sun was low, casting long shadows. Emily and Mark passed by, waving casually, but their energy was tense. I noticed her glance toward us, lingering a beat too long. Mark's jaw was tight, eyes flicking between Rachel and me. She's aware, I said quietly. Good, Rachel replied. Awareness is the first step toward reckoning. I laughed softly. You make it sound like a chess game. It is, she said, eyes gleaming. Every move matters. But patience is the real power. It struck me how calm she was, how completely in control. And yet there was something else, something electric. My heart beat faster not just because of the tension with Emily, but because of the quiet intensity of Rachel's presence. It wasn't lust, not exactly. It was trust, admiration, and an undeniable connection. Later that week, Emily attempted to confront me. I was at the grocery store, just picking up a few things. She approached cautiously, Mark hovering behind her. Noah, we need to talk, she said, voice pitched low. I smiled lightly. About what? She hesitated. Her eyes flicked to Rachel, who was sitting nearby on a bench, reading quietly. Emily stiffened, realizing Rachel was there, and fully aware. You moved on so quickly, Emily's voice trailed off. I didn't answer. I just nodded slightly. Silence, I realized, was the most unsettling response I could give. Emily's expression faltered. She searched my face for anger, for spite, for any sign of weakness. There was none. After she walked away, I found Rachel waiting in the parking lot. See? She said. No confrontation needed. The effect is louder when it's quiet. I couldn't help but smile. It's effective. Rachel tilted her head, her gaze softening. Power isn't about revenge. It's about presence, patience, and knowing who you are. And I did know. I was no longer the guy who had lost himself in betrayal. I was aware, calm, aligned. But more than that, I felt something I hadn't in months, something I hadn't even thought I could feel again. Safety. Connection. Desire, restrained but undeniable. That night, we walked home together, side by side. No words were necessary. The streets were quiet, leaves rustling underfoot. Emily was still part of the story, but no longer its center. And as I looked at Rachel, I realized that the narrative had shifted. This wasn't just about what Emily had done. It was about who I had become and who I was willing to be, alongside someone who made me feel seen, respected, and alive. The lesson was complete. And yet, the story wasn't over. Because sometimes, the end of one chapter is just the beginning of another. The weeks after Emily's slow unraveling felt different. There was no dramatic confrontation, no shouting, no scenes. Just small victories. Her uncertainty, her hesitation, and the subtle realization that I had moved on in ways she hadn't anticipated. It was quiet, almost invisible, but power doesn't always need to announce itself. Rachel and I continued our routine. Gym sessions, walks through the park, diner coffee, silent companionship. The intensity between us was no longer about tension or revenge. It was about presence, trust, and understanding. Every glance, every word, every small gesture carried meaning, but it wasn't manipulative. It was honest. One evening, we were at the lake again, the same place we had shared our first quiet moment of understanding. The water reflected the fading light, stretching gold and pink across the surface. Rachel sat beside me, shoulders brushing. I didn't speak. I didn't need to. Her calm energy was enough. "You've changed," she said finally. "I have," I admitted. "I don't feel like the same person I was before Emily." "You shouldn't," she said. "Some lessons are too sharp to forget, but you're stronger for them." I nodded. "And you? You've helped me see that." She smiled softly. "We help each other, Noah. That's what matters." We stayed there until the sun fully disappeared, the sky darkening into the deep purples and blues of night. The town was quiet. No judgment, no whispers, just two people who had survived emotional storms and emerged aligned, aware, and, in some ways, unbreakable. Emily faded from the immediate picture. She was still around, still moving through her life with Mark, but her presence no longer carried the same weight. I noticed when she tried to engage socially. Her laughter forced, her posture tentative. I didn't gloat. I simply recognized the natural consequence of choices made. Rachel and I, however, were not defined by anyone else's missteps. Our connection was ours, built on understanding, patience, and shared experiences. That was what made it real. That was what made it lasting. We began spending time in ways that felt forward-looking rather than reactionary. Exploring new places in the town, revisiting old spots with fresh perspectives, discovering hidden pockets of life we hadn't noticed before. Every step we took together strengthened the quiet bond between us, one built not on drama, but on trust and mutual respect. One night, while walking home, she took my hand. Not urgently, not as a signal, just a natural gesture. I held it without hesitation. In that simple act, there was more meaning than words could carry. Comfort, desire, partnership. I realized that life doesn't hand you perfect stories. It hands you moments, choices, and the people who walk beside you. Revenge, heartbreak, betrayal, they are chapters that shape you, but they do not define the end. Rachel and I had learned that, and in that realization, there was freedom. By the time we reached my apartment, I felt something I hadn't in months: hope. Not the naive kind, but the steady, grounded kind that grows from survival, reflection, and trust. Emily had played her part in the story, yes, but she no longer controlled the narrative. Rachel looked at me, a faint smile on her lips. "Ready for what comes next?" I nodded. "Yeah, I think I am." And for the first time in a long time, I believed it. The past was behind us. The future, unknown, unpredictable, and entirely ours, awaited. We walked inside together, leaving the night, the town, and old betrayals behind.